Good evening and welcome to our second town hall meeting. This evening we will address questions from North Branford Intermediate School and North Branford High School. At this time, can we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for joining this evening. We will follow the same format as we did on Tuesday evening. We'll share information with you and then we'll open it up to any questions that came in prior to tonight's meeting. And if you have any questions, you can log on to Facebook, which you're already on, and you can link in and send questions directly during the meeting. We'll answer them. At this time, I'm going to turn the program over to Dr. Welch, who has been receiving questions. We have Nurse Cindy Turillo here from our nursing staff. She is our lead nurse, our nursing supervisor, who will answer any questions regarding any medical questions or issues that the schools are practicing at this time. I also have the middle school principal, Mr. Keith O'Rourke, and high school principal, Mr. Todd Steffler here. We have our assistant principals here tonight, Mr. Greg Woods, Megan Russick from NBIS. Bruce Williams is on the tech support and answering questions, and Tracy Wooten, our Director of Curriculum and Instruction, is here as well. We also have Liz Hoskins here representing the PTO, who has fielded questions for us in the past, and if she has any, we'll allow her to at the appropriate time. So that being said, I know you're probably wondering, what does he have on the desk right there? These are the fogging, ionizing machines. I wanted to just have them as a visual because there were many questions before the start of the year if they had come in. And we changed orders along the way. They were back ordered. We found a company and we've had them for about 2 weeks now. We have 2 in each of the buildings. They handle 4 gallons of water with sanitizing tabs, chlorine-based tabs. They've been very efficient and useful to our custodial team. So at the end of the school day, we have additional staff that walks and sanitizes the buildings with these. We also, since the start of school, hired 2 more full-time custodians. So we have a split person between Jerome, Harrison, and Tutucket that are serving 4 hours per shift. And we had a full-time person that came on and went down to Jerome, Harrison. We also, in addition to that, have 4 sanitizers, which was 1 in each building that are there from 8 to 2 o'clock, and they're charged to just walk around and hitting all high contact area spots and cleaning anywhere that is necessary throughout the day. So that's the update just on some of the cleaning, and I'm sure there'll be more questions as we go through. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to Dr. Welch.
All right, welcome everyone. I thought we would start, what we'll do is we'll review some of the common questions that we received from families. Some of these are repeat questions, so if you joined us the other night for the elementary focus, excuse us for repeating those answers, but for people that weren't there, we want them to get the same information. And then we'll jump into our more secondary specific questions. So really one of the first questions is about remote learning and asking if that is an option for the entire year. So the remote learning program is something that the state has put in place to service families that are feeling uncomfortable with the full reopening and have personal or family reasons related to health or safety. As long as that remains an option through the state, which is under consideration by the state due to a lot of the resource issues that they're noticing schools having with providing that option. But as long as the state allows that to continue, North Branford would continue with that model and allowing it. If the state were to take that model away and no longer say that schools have to do that, then we would have to look at our resources and how we're designing instruction. I don't know if you wanted to add anything, Ms. Wooten, or is that okay?
I agree, Dr. Welch. If the state requires us, obviously we will continue to provide it. The state is indeed considering whether or not it is feasible to continue voluntary remote learning. That is students that are not quarantined or homesick. If the case is reconsidered, then obviously we will look at our own resources and how our staff and students are responding to virtual learning and move from there.
So just along those lines with the remote learning and where we're at, currently at this time, We have students that have been out quarantined, 5 students from NBIS from a week ago. They will return next Tuesday, and 10 staff members from NBIS who will return next Tuesday as well. At the high school, where we had the field hockey team with 4 positive tests, all students have returned. 39 students are back in school, and our field hockey team is back playing again, and they are 2-0. They won today 5-0. Just for a sports update, so they're doing very well. Kudos to the girls. So that's where we're at right now.
The next question asks about air purifiers being purchased for the winter months in schools, especially with the heat on and the possibility of windows being closed. Air purifiers are not something that is advocated for or recommended by CDC or in the state reopening plan. There's some concerns that air purifiers would promote droplets in their use. So that's not something that we have planned or will use. During the winter months, we would continue to have hallway doors open. We would continue to use windows at times, so opening and shutting them periodically, balancing the temperature in the room with that airflow. There was a question about the tents, if the district is planning to keep the tents or remove the tents, and I think, that's building based. Some buildings have plans to continue the tents use as the winter months and the colder air. Other buildings may plan to not continue their use, just depending on kind of their structures. So I think that's up for debate, building based. For district plans, the question was, what are we going to do as we head into the colder weather? We know that there's a lot of outdoor mask breaks, a lot of outdoor time built into our plans, and that's been going very well, and staff and students are accessing that often. So our plans are really to continue to go outdoors as much as possible, even as colder weather comes. I know in our school at Tucka Valley, if it's above 20 degrees, we're going outside. That's what we would do for recess, so we would do the same for mask breaks. And I think all buildings will have plans to kind of look at, covered areas, outdoor areas that are free from snow, if that's an issue, where students can still get outdoors and get a mask break. We would also look at our indoor areas, our large spaces, the gym and cafeteria spaces when they're not in use, and other large areas where you could take smaller groups of students in and continue the mask breaks. That would require obviously a lot of scheduling in all the buildings, but that's something that we plan to do in the colder months. Next question asks about quarantining, and really if there is any guidance given to students who are going into quarantining and what kind of follow-up do they have. So off the bat, the students who are in quarantine, school nurses send home kind of a tracking sheet that asks families to look at their symptoms and take their temperature every day. That's something that we expect them to do. We are hearing feedback from families about if the schools can support that with just some reminders for students and families out in the community, what it means to be quarantining, staying home. So that's something that we might include in the future. We haven't done that up to this point. We would also obviously encourage the parents to being in charge of students and making sure they adhere to those guidelines and remain quarantined everywhere if they're quarantined for school so that they're not interacting or potentially spreading. Additionally, East Shore Health might follow up with quarantine depending on how active they were in putting students in quarantine due to an active case. And our school nurses may have follow-up too, as well as certainly staff. If students are in quarantine, they're in their remote learning model, so there is that level of follow-up and guidance given. So I think buildings will kind of look at their communication and what they're providing to those families and trying to streamline and making sure they hit all of those things so families feel like they're well informed on what it requires if they go to that model.
There was a question on Tuesday evening as well regarding the communication from the district. That will continue to come from my office to the entire district if we have a positive student or staff member case. So you will continue to be notified. We do that for many reasons, but many of you have kids in multiple buildings, and we want to make sure that all communication is being sent out immediately.
Nice segue, because you had the next question. The next one for you is really about kind of any, indication that you can give people about shutdown or moving to full remote learning. That's a question we continue to receive.
Sure. I had a conversation with East Shore Health today, and the metric that we're using is out of Harvard University, and it's on a 7-day time span. It's going to shift to 14 days. So we'll continue to monitor. We know that in Connecticut right now, Eastern Connecticut, there's been some upticks and the numbers have changed. And we're seeing it locally as well. As of last Sunday, our caseload in North Branford was at 98. So we were aware of the 4 students that we had and staff members from NBIS, which impacted our total case number in North Branford. So that being said, we go day to day, we monitor with East Shore Health, and we're on top of it. What would it take for us to close down? To close a building down, it would have to be a significant outbreak, and that is something that I would work with our medical advisor and East Shore Health. I would not be opposed to shutting a classroom or a grade down, but they're starting to change the mindset of keeping kids in school. They want kids back in school. They want them actively participating in their learning with the teacher in the classroom. And even in the businesses, you know that we went to stage 3 today in Connecticut, so you're starting to see larger gatherings outdoors and indoors, and that seems to be the progression. So we don't have a number right now. It's something that we would keep at the forefront with safety for our staff and for our students. The biggest problem that we're finding is finding substitutes. As you know, at the intermediate school, we have 10 staff members out, and that could cause a shutdown if we're not able to staff and supervise our children when they come in. So I want to commend the high school and the middle school who have dealt with this on separate occasions, one for students, one for staff, and being able to rally their troops and get subs into the buildings and ask staff members to do multiple things so that we could stay open. So.
The next question before I pass it to Mrs. Tirolo for more of the nursing questions is about contact tracing. So on Tuesday night, I answered the question about elementary schools and really kind of looking at a whole class due to the high contact, students sharing space together, that the entire elementary class would be quarantined if there's a positive case. I know in the upper level secondary schools that looks a little bit differently. And certainly from the experience in the high school case, it was going into the room and really looking at the physical space and the distance, looking at that 6 feet, 15-minute exposure time. So that's actively administrators and nursing staff going into rooms and looking and consulting with East Shore Health to determine how many students they're impacted. All of us, when we do that, are looking at buses, after-school activities, and using East Shore Health to kind of look at the community potential spread. So I think with that, I'm going to shift it over to Mrs. Tirolo. She's going to talk a little bit about some of the quarantine and other questions that are common. And then after her piece, we'll kind of get to some of the specific questions that are really more geared toward the high school administration and the NBIS administration.
Okay, so the first 2 questions I have kind of go together. The first one is, if a student is placed in quarantine, are they required to provide a negative test result before returning to school? And the second part of that is, if a student had a positive COVID test result and is staying home, are they required to be cleared by a doctor before returning to school? So if your child or you as an adult are home on quarantine, once you serve out your quarantine, be it the 10 or 14 days, as long as you or the child feels well, they have no symptoms, you're free to return to school or work at that point. If you should develop symptoms over that time, then we want you to contact us and your doctor. It's possible they might order a repeat test, but if you feel well and if you have no symptoms for 24 hours before it's time to return, you are free to return. It's not required that you get tested again. We do ask, though, that anytime anyone is tested, be it positive or negative, that you submit a copy of those results to the school nurse. Also, in regards to that, please, if your child is sent home or if they're called out sick and you're asked to get a doctor's note, please provide that note upon return to school. The nurses, on a few cases, are having a hard time getting a written note before the child returns to school, and we do need that. So if you're having trouble, contact the nurse and she'll make arrangements to be sure that note gets to us. The next question, which is similar to the last one, how is contact tracing done when there is a confirmed case, and how do you ensure that all students that were in contact with the person are quarantined? So the first thing we do when we get a positive case, it's typically that either one of the nurses or the principal gets that phone call. We identify the person. Each of the nurses and principals has a template that we drew up so that all of the information is immediately available. Upon that, we do contact East Shore Health. They've been extremely involved. I personally talk to them just about every day. We then look at the classroom seating charts. Every teacher has submitted a classroom seating chart, and anytime that changes, they're submitting a new one to the nurse and the principal in the school. So we have that. Then we go and we actually walk the classroom and we see who has been within 6 feet. A close contact is considered within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes. We're not really looking at masks because we're assuming that the students have their masks on all the time. So it's 6 feet for 15 minutes. We also review bus seating charts, which DACO has submitted, and we keep a copy of those to see who may have been closer than 6 feet on the school bus. We then begin contact tracing. In school, we're responsible for helping the contact tracing of what goes on in school. Where were the children together, besides in the classroom, perhaps the cafeteria, perhaps at recess or a specials class. East Shore Health gets involved in that. They're contact tracing along with us, but also in the community. So in other words, does your child go to church? Does your child go to CCD? Has he or she been with friends and family? Have they been at a get-together, a wedding, things like that. So if East Shore Health calls, please answer. They have some very important information to share with you. At that point, if your child has been involved, if your child is considered a close contact to someone who comes back positive, you will receive a phone call from one of the administrators or from the nurse letting you know that. There will also be a letter sent home, and as Mr. Schoonmaker said, he will notify the schools. The following day, you will, as a parent, receive an email that's a combination of a letter directing you what to do, how to follow up, and it also has a template in it for you to record symptoms. We're asking that you check with your child every day, see what their symptoms are. Hopefully, they don't have any. And we also ask that you're checking their temperature twice a day when they've had a contact. Besides, we're all checking our kids' temperatures every day. We all know that, and that seems to be going very well. So that is how we contact trace. We contact trace in school. We're helping East Shore Health, and they are contact tracing in the community. The next question is, what is the specific role of East Shore Health in determining district steps in quarantine? I think that covers that. They've been very involved and very receptive. They're easy to get a hold of. They call us right back. So I think that answers that question. And how does East Shore Health determine contact tracing protocols and steps? I think we covered that as well. They work directly with the administrators and the nurses from all the schools. They provide us with guidance as to the known cases, and they assist us with who needs to be quarantined. If we have a question and we're not quite sure, we're going to err on the end of caution and quarantine those children. They also assist us with clubs and sports and anything else. They have a lot of questions that they pull up with us. And I think that is it for the nursing questions. Most of it was about contact tracing.
So the contact tracing piece, getting back to working with East Shore Health. So what we will do is, a situation at the high school where we had the field hockey team, there were 4 students who had tested positive. A total of 39 students went out. So what we do is we send the names and phone numbers of the students to East Shore Health, and then they take that to another level. So it's really, there's 2 points of contact tracing. So we do everything school involved and with transportation and extracurricular. East Shore then gets into a more thorough contact tracing at their end. All of the information is kept confidential. When I do press releases, I never tell like a student's grade or a faculty member's building. It's just a member of our school community, and I keep it very generic for HIPAA, obviously, and for everyone's rights to privacy, and we'll continue to do that.
All right, so at this point, it kind of brings the questions that are more specific to secondary. So what I'll do is I'll kind of pose the questions, and if they're twofold, looking for information from both high school and intermediate school, we'll look to get those. If it's more specific for one building, we can let them weigh in on. If I can help answer it, I'm certainly happy to do that too. The first question really geared is, are staff members being prevented from congregating with each other to reduce potential exposure? And I think that comes up specific to staff being quarantined at NBIS. I think So,
I can take that.
sure.
So staff are encouraged when planning, when meeting, when discussing students, and as a middle school, there's a meeting structure that we follow to discuss a variety of different things that come up throughout the course of our school week. They're encouraged to socially distance, and that's what our staff has been told the mandate is. They're expected to be, after our incident, at school at least 8 feet apart when attending meetings in person. They're also encouraged to utilize our Google Meet platform to meet as well, which is an option too. Part of being a middle school requires the staff to meet, to plan, to collaborate. So those things are still taking place, but they're taking place right now, especially with what we've recently gone through, with extra precaution to make sure that social distancing is occurring.
And I think all of us in buildings are looking for ways to bring people together more than doing it just through Zoom meetings, trying to do more of that live interaction. So using outdoor spaces, getting people spread out is certainly a goal that we're all.
I do want to just add to the NBIS with the large number of staff who are quarantined. We certainly took safety as our highest priority and asking 2 very basic questions and then sending 10 people out that were even close to being in the proximity of this person, and even off campus as well with our staff members. And working with East Shore Health, we made it clear that we were going to err on the side of caution and take a large group out, and then we would evaluate it as we progress through. That seemed to be the right decision, and knock on wood has worked at NBAS to date.
The next question came up in the elementary one too, and I kind of answered that, but I think the question is more secondary, related to live streaming and staff, kind of what's the policy expectation for mask wearing? So when I answered that for elementary, there are opportunities sometimes when our staff are meeting privately, with no other students in the room in a different location, and they would have their mask off because they're just electronically communicating with students with no one else in the room. If that's not a possible option, kind of what are the other upper secondary buildings doing related to that, I guess is the question.
So in the classroom, the expectation is to always have your mask on in the classroom. When we have some classes that go outside on a routine basis, phys ed is one example of that. The students walk routinely, they're all 12 feet apart, spaced, and it's okay to take your mask off under those settings. But the expectation is that they have their mask on.
I would echo that. The only time that a staff member maybe remove the mask is in the case where our guidance counselors are doing a virtual meeting with a student in a different location and a parent zooming in for the meeting, and the guidance counselor would be in their office on their own.
Just to add, when I shared this on Tuesday night too, and I think it's just important to mention, we do have staff that work closely sometimes with students with a speech or language issue where it might require using a face shield instead of a mask so that a child can really see and understand language, and that's usually done in a small group.
And additional PPEs are set with the plexiglass, and they're supplied to all of our special ed and speech people so that they have an extra layer. In addition to a mask or a face shield, we also have the plexiglass as well. So there's 3 parts that we have in place.
Next question talks about cleaning, so it's really asking how is staff cleaning being monitored and enforced, and just I think the concern that because in the secondary level there are different groups coming in and out of rooms, just how that's going.
So we're giving constant reminders about the importance of that. One thing that we instituted at the high school was an opportunity for kids to anonymously report any sorts of concerns that they have regarding any sort of issue, including the cleaning piece. And some kids have given us some feedback about that. Anytime that a parent has contacted us, whether it be about the cleaning or a bus issue, I know the bus issue is on the list as well. We follow up with a visit to the bus or a classroom teacher or a classroom space. So we're more than happy and able to do that. And that piece for the kids is always there for them to report any sort of concern as well.
We have an anonymous reporting mechanism as well. It's on our website for any issue. But in this case, The issue of cleaning can certainly be reported if it's a concern. Every staff member, every classroom teacher has a cleaning protocol for the end of their class, for the class that's currently in that room before they leave. And additionally, we also have a routine in place with our custodians. Our morning custodian does a routine check and sweep of the building to make sure that everything was cleaned appropriately the night before.
Similar to that question, this one asks about the idea of having students assist with cleaning, and sometimes students do that at the end of the class period, wondering if students or staff administration might consider having students do that at the beginning of the period, that they might be more invested in cleaning if they know it's for themselves. So,
Yeah, I respect the investment piece and the motivation piece. I think having conversations with the nursing staff and having kids clean the space that they occupy versus cleaning a space as they come in as someone else has departed, it's safer to have the kids clean their own space. If kids want to come in and do a double cleaning, if you will, and clean their space before they occupy it, we'd be more than able and willing to have them do that.
It's important that everyone knows every classroom has a supply of spray bottles and/or wipes, and that's a common practice throughout, especially in the 6-12, where they're old enough and responsible enough to handle the spray bottle and the wipes and be responsible with that. And that's something that we'll continue to reinforce. Every classroom is equipped with a Purell pump station for cleaning their hands as well, and there's other bottles of sanitizer throughout. Kids are allowed to carry their own hand sanitizer as well. We encourage that they have them in their possession if they're not comfortable using, what we're providing.
next question is about mask breaks. I know I addressed that a little bit earlier, but if NBIS or NBHS has anything different that they would talk about for mask breaks in the colder months.
So our hallways at NBIS are marked every 12 feet. And diagonally, we have at least 9 feet of separation as well from where the markings are in our hallways. So we already have a system in place to be able to do mask breaks inside that allow for a 9 to 12 foot mask break internally. We've been extremely fortunate. The weather's been very cooperative so far this year, but we put those markings in place anticipating what will we do when the weather gets cold, what will we do if it's raining outside, and we already have a system in place for when the weather gets cold.
We plan on continuing to go outdoors and utilize the courtyard, which is an internal outdoor space, of course, which is advantageous for all the academic classes in the Diamond area. We've also used the front of the building, and we're going to continue to use the tent areas as well, and use the same guideline that Dr. Welch mentioned before, with the 20-degree mark. If it's warm enough to put a jacket on, cold enough to put a jacket on to get the kids outside. That's what we're going to plan on doing until we can do it.
Well, I think the high school students are used to cold hallways, and I don't think that's going to be a huge transition. We will be instructing with the classroom doors open. I think you'll see a dramatic increase in the hallway temperature with a lot of the heat from the classrooms going into the hallways. That will continue on until further notice. So I think that the climate control in the high school will be a little better once we do fire up the burners in all of the buildings and get the heat going.
Couple more questions on the masks. One is about buses 6 through 12, and just hearing, I think, at least the way the question is framed, being concerned that some students are not wearing their masks. So how are the middle of the high school handling that, monitoring that, following up with that? That
is a challenge, and we received specific information from parents, and oftentimes the parents want to remain anonymous, and we respect that. We strategically visit some buses and have done some general announcements to kids, and then ask the bus company and DATCO to follow up with us and periodically check back with the kids who are on that bus to see how things are going. And again, the anonymous reporting for kids is always available to them, but DATCO has been very responsive whenever we've emailed them or contacted them about any sort of concern. The one challenge for the bus driver is, in seeing this and visiting some buses, and this could be high school or middle school kids, is they can slouch down on those seats, and all of a sudden the bus driver's trying to focus on the road, and the head of the kid is below the level of the seat, so it is a challenge.
And the primary responsibility is the driver is to transport the students safely to and from our school. That's the number one. The expectation is, especially for the 6-12 students, the responsibility of keeping the mask on, and that's gonna be on them. We'll remind. I work with Karen, the branch manager for DAPCO, and we speak frequently about cleaning protocols and things that we're doing to try to, emphasize student safety. But for wearing a mask and keeping the mask on, that really lies with the student. So we encourage you to please share that with your children. If they are riding the bus to and from or one way to school, that is a part of the academic day, and that can result in a consequence if they are violating that. We now have the authority through the state of Connecticut that, through a progression, that children can be placed on remote learning for failure to wear a mask. It's obviously not going to be the first offense and you're out, but if we're consistently having to remind you about not only your safety, but the safety of others, because you're deciding not to wear your mask, that is a possible consequence. So have that conversation with your children. It's critical that we work together in partnership and you support us in that expectation.
It's a nice segue into the next question. The next question is really that. Can you describe the secondary kind of discipline policy for mask violations?
So we've addressed it with our whole staff, and for our staff to, ask a student, to remind them. Sometimes it's accidental, and then sometimes it's deliberate. Those deliberate cases, we immediately meet with the student. We try to redirect with the student. We re-educate the importance for themselves and for others. We call the parents on the phone. We ask for their cooperation. And if it becomes a pattern, 2 or more times, then we are having that conversation to move to remote learning. We haven't had to get to that point yet, but when we look at not following COVID protocols, we're typically looking for a first offense with that to be about a 14-day remote learning, and hopefully get them back in the building and realize the importance of it and move forward productively.
And the only thing that I'll add to that is, in dealing with all discipline, there's never a black and white way to handle a discipline situation. There are always a variety of factors that go into how you adjudicate a situation. So you would have to look at all the information within that specific situation to come to a determination of the appropriate course of discipline or consequence would be.
And if I may, if it's a problem of the mask being uncomfortable, because they are uncomfortable, feel free to ask your child to go see the school nurse or call the school nurse and ask her to call your child down. We've been very fortunate to have received some donations, and the district has allowed us to purchase several different kinds of masks. So perhaps it's just that they're not comfortable in the mask they're wearing or the mask that you purchased for them. So we do have options. So if as parents you're finding they're not so much being obstinate as that they're uncomfortable, call the school nurse and she'll help them and show them what we have to offer. And it's worked in our school for our little ones where they didn't have the right fit. So that's an option. Maybe they have a mask on that's too big or too small. We have sizes, we can help them and find something that works best.
We also, speaking of not only masks, we have thermometers in every building, and we did a massive giveaway this summer from a donation from East Shore Health. Thermometers were at a premium, they were hard to find. If you are in need of a thermometer, please reach out to your school nurse. We have a supply in every office, and we're encouraging all parents to just take the 30 seconds before you send your child to school to take their temperature. Obviously, if they're symptomatic or they're saying something about it, we encourage you to keep them home, but it's a good habit to get into if, prior to going out the door, you just do a quick temperature check. And we do have plenty in stock, right, nurse?
Yes,
to give
we
out.
all have them.
Okay.
And it's a good thermometer.
It syncs with your cell phone.
It can, if you hook it up. You don't have to, but it does if you want it to.
Next question is about locker use in middle and high school. So as the colder weather comes, the students have more stuff that they're expected to carry with them all day. The question is really asking, can that use of lockers be revisited?
So it's definitely been a concern that's been voiced at our level. We surveyed our parents over a course of 2 weeks, and it was the number one issue that came up. And the issue is the weight of the backpacks for our students. Some of our students weigh 60, 70 pounds. You're not supposed to carry more than 10 to 20% of your body weight in a backpack. And, unfortunately, when we weigh 60 to 70 pounds, that's pretty hard when you consider the fact that they have Chromebooks, they're carrying their lunch with them. Some of the thermoses that they have are made of what seems to be Kevlar. They're very heavy, big, bulky thermoses with Dr. Welch's. So
Chicken soup in there?
it adds up. It all adds up, and for the safety and well-being of our students who are in that position, we're going to allow lockers to be accessible to students. We're in the process of formulating a plan that would have our cohorts accessing lockers at the same time, with lockers strategically placed about 7 to 8 feet apart within a hallway at a grade level. And the lockers will have distinct times during the day that those cohorts access the lockers with the supervision of the teachers. So the plan, we've been formulating the plan. It takes a lot of strategy to figure out how to do this with a minimal impact to instruction, because that's one of our challenges as well with our doors being open, but we plan on rolling this plan out next week. And we will most likely start with the 7th and the 8th grade right away to see how it goes, and to follow with the 6th grade as well. So the plan is for everybody to have lockers. It's going to be optional. Students are not going to have to use the locker. If they prefer to carry their backpack, they'll be able to do that. But as the question mentioned, there will be cold weather soon. In addition to the heavy backpacks, they're also going to have jackets and other things that come with cold weather. So we plan on allowing students to access lockers in the near future.
And I guess that would be a difference in our building with our high schoolers. Generally, our high school population does not access their lockers for storage during normal times. It's more of a place to conjugate and hang and be in the same spot. The building is set up a little differently, and a lot of our lockers are all very tightly spaced within specific hallways. So we have some different challenges with the building, among other things, with the building and the lockers. So we don't have that. We don't feel as though that we have the same need, and also the opportunity to space the kids in the same fashion. So we haven't put into a plan a place to do that at this point in time, especially given the jackets that we use on our person for the mass breaks to go outdoors. It's something we may have to revisit, but we may need to use some spaces in classrooms. Music, I know the kids bring in instruments. I see those kids carrying more than most. So it's something we may need to visit in a different way, but at this time we don't have a specific plan to reopen the lockers, primarily for safety reasons.
These plans are fluid, and we said that right from the beginning, that it's day to day, hour to hour, week to week. And when we heard there was a concern specifically with the middle school and the locker situation, it's a balance between touch points and prevention of potential transmission versus the physical safety and well-being of the children carrying excessive weight from class to class, going up and down stairs and moving about the building. And we felt that the compromise of distancing and allowing them to do their locker stops throughout the day was something that we could manage. And that'll be something that we'll continue to evaluate throughout the entire plan. It's the beauty of having the communication and the team mentality to make sure that we're constantly evaluating and reevaluating our plan.
Next question is kind of a question / suggestion about including students in some kind of advisory role related to COVID at the secondary level. So is that something that's happening or something that's under consideration?
Only if it's by cohort.
Yeah, I think we value student input very much. So as Mr. Suffolk mentioned, we do have the anonymous reporting that is being monitored every day. We've made a lot of changes, and we've been able to monitor things based off of a lot of what students have put in there. Our advisory sessions, which happen every Friday, are also a place where we focus on a lot of social emotional learning, but also just general time for teachers and students just to reflect on what's going well, what's not going well, how are you feeling. We posed questions of, how were you feeling before school started? Now that we're a few weeks in, how are you feeling? How's it changed? What could we do better? And that feedback comes back up to our office, and we make changes accordingly there. So there isn't a formal advisory panel board, but students are always able to voice how they're doing. And, I think Mr. Steffler and I and a lot of the teachers are constantly visible and able to talk to students as well. And, I think it's going well. I think students do feel like they have a voice.
And at this point, we've surveyed staff, we've surveyed parents. Next week's survey is for students. So we plan on rolling out the student survey next week to get their feedback on how things are going so far. In addition to that, we have a daily period. Our flex period every day focuses, up until this point, on social and emotional learning. And our staff who are charged with being with those students during those points of the day are constantly keeping their finger on the pulse of how things are going, asking them for their feedback as to what works, what doesn't work, what can be better. And I frequently do get input from both staff representing students, as well as messages from students from time to time making recommendations on how things could be better.
I want to piggyback off of those answers. I've had the opportunity over the last couple of weeks to be in the buildings and just this week talking with groups of high school students in a couple of different classrooms. I was in the art room yesterday with a group of students and really asking, how is it going? What could we do better? What are some of the concerns? What are some of the things? And the kids it was amazing. One, I can't believe how quiet when you walk through the buildings and at every level it just seems that they're so happy to be back. I think they really value the fact that they were separated from March 13th until we returned and came back late, and it's just interesting to watch them, and I know a lot of it is with the separation piece and getting back in and getting acclimated with being around and the social piece and what that's done to everyone, to staff, to students. So it's interesting to go in and watch how they interact. And they've been very positive with how things are going and what we're doing. But it is different, and I don't know if any of the other administrators want to comment on, but it's noticeable. It's a noticeable change, and it's something that, it's the first time that I've ever experienced anything like this, to see, kids coming back after a 7-month or a 6-month separation. And that's the reason why, personally, how I feel about staying in and having kids together with live teachers and social interaction and being there with all of our support mechanisms in place. So I don't know if anyone wants to comment on.
I'll echo that. I think our students are thrilled to be back. I think this has been a really tough situation for everyone, so we're always trying to find the good out of this. We had some students that returned today off of quarantine, and right in the parking lot, we asked them, how are you? Just the first thing out of their mouths, we're just happy to be back, So that's a testament to all of our staff and our teachers, but just how important being in school and being in that school environment really is.
And I have no problem repeating the same message, that our students are clearly happy to be back in school. They appreciate the fact that the buildings are open, that they have the opportunity to go to school and to be children in school. I'm extremely impressed with how well behaved they've been as far as the masks. For the most part, they have them on with no problem. And it's just so impressive how well they have handled themselves, with the expectations that have been placed on them. But, with that said, when I've had the chance to get into classes and talk to students, they're just happy to be back in school. They're happy to be back in school, and I couldn't be happier that we have them in school.
Yep, I would echo that too. I think our students are happy to be back, enjoying the school experience, although different, and adjusting to what's different. We're really enjoying the connection. I think our families are really happy that their children are back in school and are really pleased with kind of the efforts that have been in place to do things safely and to communicate and to adjust plans in action. I think our staff has been amazing at kind of rolling and adjusting with the changes and doing the extra things and still getting to the academic work amidst all the social emotional learning and all of the new policies and procedures. So I think we're getting to a place where people are hitting their rhythm and it's feeling better and not as stressful. Just a couple more questions that we have, and then that will be it for the ones that we received ahead of time. This one really is asking, this is more of a Scott type question. So if the metrics indicate a medium or moderate risk, would the district consider a hybrid plan that allows remote learning for high school and more in-person learning, high school, middle school, and more in-person learning for K through 5? I know how much you like hybrid.
So I'll go back to, I think, the statement that I made earlier, that I'm more inclined to isolate, we'll call it a hotspot or an area or a classroom or a grade, and keep all learners actively engaged in full-time interaction with teachers in their buildings. I'm going to follow the lead of the health advisor and the East Shore Health, and it's something that we're not going to gamble with, but we will do everything that we possibly can to keep kids coming to school. I really struggle with recognizing the difference between a pre-K student and a senior, and the value of importance of one versus the other, where they have to be in versus they can be at home. I don't agree with that. I have 4 children. I have college-age children, high school-age children, and I know with my 2 high school students that I have, my children, that they want to be in school. They need to be in school, and similar to a pre-K or a first grader. And that's where we'll go with our decision making.
And then the last question is sort of, an interesting one. I don't know if Cindy, it's more toward you maybe. It's asking how often our teachers and staff are getting COVID testing. So obviously without sharing anything personal or HIPAA related.
We aren't required, staff, nurses, nobody is required to have a COVID test. We can't call you and tell you that your child needs one. We can suggest it. We can give you the recommendation. Your pediatrician is in the same boat. No one can force anyone to have a COVID test. As far as staff being tested, there is no requirement from the CDC or local health department that staff be tested regularly for COVID. Some have, by their own choosing, but we have no requirement for that. We're doing the same things that everybody else is. We're not coming to school when we're sick, checking temperatures. We're doing the same thing as the whole community and hoping to stay healthy along with all the kids.
We are encouraging staff, if they are quarantined or if they're not feeling well, to get the test, and we are encouraging not the quick rapid
PCR
test. We're requesting the PCR test. You may take 24 to 48 to 72 hours to get the result, but it's accurate, and we are encouraging students and staff to get
The antibody test is not, the fast antibody test is not recommended if you do not have any symptoms. In fact, in some cases, we won't accept that. So if you have symptoms, it's okay, but if you don't, our medical advisor has advised against it. So, be sure most people go through their doctor to get a test, although you can walk in and get one, but the test that you get depends on your illness and whether or not you have any symptoms. The same goes for traveling. Do you want to mention traveling a little bit?
So if you do travel out of state to a hot spot or a state that is on a list, we are requiring that you quarantine or complete this PCR test upon return, which would then keep you out potentially a few days with a negative result before coming in, or you would have to be out 14 days.
And there's a survey online that you have to take. If that becomes a case, just give the school nurse a call. It's very simple, but you will have to quarantine. In some cases, you can get tested. Do let us know if anyone's traveling to a hot spot.
And our nurses will not be participating in any testing even if the state has a surplus of tests. And there's some districts, some of our city schools are getting test kits, and we will not participate. I do not, personally, this is my feeling and my decision. I will not have my nursing staff doing testing in the building.
All right, Bruce, I guess that goes to you. That's all the questions that we received ahead of time. One question. All right.
It's not for me. Is it a toughie or is it?
It's easy.
It's a softball. Okay.
So if a student is absent, sick, not COVID, can they participate in remote learning? Whether they're out for 1 day or a week?
I'm never going to have a student that they can't
Not to
participate.
excuse the absence.
Right.
The absent.
But can
Can they participate so they keep up with it?
So if they have the link or it is being broadcast through their Google Classroom, obviously they are entitled and encouraged to keep up with instruction. What we do ask is that if students are out of school and not listed as virtual or remote learning students, that they not go on and then try to engage in catching up with work during that time, to please see a teacher after the class is done, or to have a discussion with a teacher through Google Classroom or another means.
And I love the motivated student who is home and ill and wants to keep up with their, academic work. So we'll do everything we can to support you. We had a question, we were putting together some survey responses today about snow days, and there was language as of yesterday with the commissioner working with and coming up with language for our ability to allow students on a day where there's inclement weather to work from home, and us to be able to deliver instruction and have that count as a day. So as soon as that is finalized, we will announce that. But it is a hot topic right now, and I think a number of superintendents are strongly in favor, considering what we're already dealing with, to be able to count those days as academic days. So that's good news.
And if I could just mention a couple of things that the nurses asked me to speak of why we had this forum to do so. I know we talked about getting notes in if you're required to get a note, and we're thankful to the parents. We know we're asking a lot of you. Some of these symptoms on the letter we sent home seem very minor and not something we would normally send your child home for, nor something you would take them to the doctor for. But given the pandemic, I think most of you have understood that this is our direction and what we are being told to do, and people have been great about getting it done. But on that note, please get those notes in, and please get a copy of the test sent in. Remember to check your children's temperature daily, and obviously not send them in if they're grade 100 or greater. And please remember to send extra masks in. They're having a hard time with some kids just remembering to have a backup mask in their backpack. So if you can just double check and make sure that that's happening. They're having a little trouble with that.
And they always can come to the nurse's
Right.
office or their principal's office for an extra mask. We have a surplus of masks, so don't worry if they get out of the house and
Right.
they lose theirs or something happens to it. We have a surplus.
Questions are coming in. Being the numbers show upticks after holidays due to people seeing family and others traveling, would you consider going remote the week after the holidays?
That we're not going to make any decisions like that on assumptions and things that we can't control. So I would be cautious of where we're going, and really it's interesting. It seems like the schools are doing the best jobs of holding to a very high standard of mask wearing and distancing. But then when they leave the school grounds, we get in a situation where the rules change, or on the weekends and the gatherings, and the responsibility is shared by all of us. And I get it. I understand families are going to travel and families are going to go see their loved ones. But just to keep in mind that this is a team effort, it's a community effort, and we're doing everything we can to keep our doors open. And so any support that we could get would be greatly appreciated. I'm not looking to change or forecast any scheduling around a holiday. We came off of the Labor Day, and we were not surprised when we had a couple of students, and we'll be as cautious as we possibly can, and we ask that families do the same.
This question is a little repetitive. When seniors visiting towns and states that are hotspots, do they need to quarantine?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And that is a law. And there are fines if you don't. So you do it if
Keep
you're
your
not sure.
seniors home.
Yeah.
If you're in a town for more than 20, if you're in a
Right.
hotspot for more than 24 hours.
24 hours. You can drive through.
Yes.
But once
Stay
you
all
stop,
day, but you have to be home in 24 hours.
in 24 hours, you have to be out of that state. Stay out of hotspots.
There's a lot of them.
The other questions have been answered.
Ms. Hoskins, anything?
I have one question, it's specifically for the high school. How do you contact trace with regards to the lunchroom? There's no assigned seating, so how do you contact trace if you...
That was another question that came up from a parent. I thought it was a really good question. What we've done is we've contacted parents and kids when they have been in a situation where we think they need to be quarantined or who they ate with. We also have the opportunity, because there's security cameras on both sides of the gym, to be able to go to a videotape if we need to locate where kids are located. We've also had some situations that Mr. Schoonmaker referred to with students that involve seniors that don't stay for lunch. So it really depends upon what the student's schedule is, because they are scheduled by class, who they typically eat with, what information we can get from the parent and the student who's been sent out due to a positive test, and the other kids who possibly are quarantined, and if we have to, we can go to a videotape.
And the maximum number at a table will be 3. So students are either sitting at 3, 2, or a single table in the lunchroom.
And the spacing, it would only be who's at your table that would have the quarantine? Or
6
Okay.
feet. 6 feet.
Okay,
For more than 15 minutes.
okay.
Those are the two criteria that we use. And it was mentioned, we have, I think over 125, Mr. Williams, 130 cameras in the district,
Yes.
totaling right now. So
Correct.
all large areas of the buildings are monitored with and now with the digital cameras, it's amazing the forensic evidence we can gather. We can see who's sitting where next to who, and it's been awesome to be able to have that tool. You know, obviously we don't have them in the classrooms, but we have seating charts, we have the bus charts, we have them in all the hallways, so very helpful. Anything else, Mr. Williams?
That's all I got.
This is our last scheduled town hall meeting that we have. That's not to say now we're able to broadcast out of our central office here, which is a great advantage. We don't have to book the room we're in. So we're going to, as I said before, we're taking this day by day, week by week, and we'll continue to keep a pulse on the community through your feedback to our administrative team, our PTOs, and if we feel there's a need to come together again, we can do this on short notice, and we'll gladly participate and get as much information out as we possibly can. So thank you. Have a great long weekend.